I need to tell you something. Something I have never said out loud to anyone. Not to a neighbor. Not to a friend. Not to the woman at the church who always seemed to be watching me with sad eyes like she already knew. I need to tell you what happened at my kitchen table on the night of August 14th, 1883. My husband sat across from me. We had just finished supper. Pork and cornbread. I had cooked it myself, same as I did every night. He pushed his plate away. He looked at me, and he said, "Roy is coming over tonight. $200 to clear my debt. You be agreeable. I'll be back in the morning." He put on his hat. He walked out the door. He did not look back at me. Not once. I sat at that table alone for a long time, and I made a decision not to run, not to cry, not to beg, to finish what I had been quietly preparing for 14 months. Before I take you all the way back to the beginning, let me tell you briefly what this story is. My name is Sarah. I grew up in a small town in West Texas. My father was an honest man who left me his land when he died. I married a man named Tom, and over 12 years, Tom took everything from me slowly, quietly, piece by piece, until I had almost nothing left. Not even my own sense of who I was. Then came the night he sold me to his creditor for $200, and that was the night he made the biggest mistake of his life. Because what Tom did not know, what nobody knew, was that I had been carrying a secret in the bottom of my boot for 14 months. A folded piece of paper, a document that was going to destroy the two men who thought they owned me. This is the story of how I got my land back, my name back, my life back, with nothing but patience, paper, a stranger's kindness, and one borrowed horse. I am going to tell you every word of it, starting from the very bottom. I grew up on a cattle ranch outside of Dry Creek, Texas. My father's name was Henry. He was not a rich man, but he was a straight one. He had 2 rules in our home. First, a person's word is the only thing that can never be taken from them. Second, the land belongs to whoever works it. I worked it. From the time I was 9 years old, I was beside my father mending fence, feeding livestock, hauling water when the creek ran low. I was not raised to sit still. I was raised to be useful. I taught myself to read from the family Bible because the school in Dry Creek stopped taking girls after age 12. I borrowed books from neighbors. I traded eggs for old newspapers. I had a hunger for learning that my circumstances kept trying to starve. When my mother died, I was 16. I became the woman of that house without anyone asking me. I cooked. I cleaned. I kept the accounts. I kept the ranch running. My father saw all of it. He told me once, when I was 19 years old, "Sarah, you are the strongest person I know. And I am including myself in that." I laughed. I told him to stop. I would spend the next 14 years trying to remember he said it. When Dad died in the spring of 1871, he left me everything. The house, the land, a small savings in a tin box under the floorboards, all of it, by legal deed, to his daughter Sarah Ann Cooper. I was 22 years old. I was grieving, and I was about to make the worst decision of my life. His name was Tom Whitfield. He was 29. He had broad shoulders and an easy smile, and he talked to me like I was the most interesting person in the room. Nobody had talked to me that way before. I did not know yet that some men learn exactly how to sound like safety so they can take up residence inside it. We were married 4 months after we met. My father's land became our home, and slowly, our home became Tom's land. That was only the beginning of what Tom would take from me. The gambling started in our second year. It was not dramatic at first. Friday nights, card games with the ranch hands. Tom would come home lighter in his pocket and heavier in his mood. I noticed. I said nothing, because in 1873, a wife who said something was a wife who caused trouble. And I had been taught many things, but not to cause trouble, so I stayed quiet. And the gambling grew. By 1875, he had lost both our horses. I started walking 3 miles to McCready's store. I did not complain. I just walked. By 1877, he had borrowed money against the house, my father's house, without telling me. He had used my name on documents I had never signed. When I found out, I sat across from him at that same kitchen table, and I asked him how he could do that. He looked at me with those easy eyes. He said it was temporary. He said he had a plan. He said, "Trust me." I wanted to believe him. God help me. I still wanted to believe him. By 1880, the trust was gone. Because where was I going to go? My father's land was tied up in Tom's debts. My savings were gone. Tom found every coin I set aside. I had no family left, and the town of Dry Creek saw Tom Whitfield as a man who had fallen on hard times, not as a man who had stolen his wife's inheritance and lost it at a card table. Nobody saw what was happening inside that house, and I, who had been told I was strong, who had been raised to be capable, started to feel something I had never felt before in my whole life. Small. I felt small, like I was taking up space that belonged to someone more important, like my thoughts and my words and my presence were just inconvenient. I stopped reading, not because I lost the love of it, but because Tom mocked it, said women who read too much get ideas. So I stopped doing it in front of him, and then, after a while, I stopped doing it at all. I stopped singing in the mornings. Tom didn't like noise before noon. I stopped wearing my mother's blue dress with the yellow buttons. Tom said it looked like I was trying too hard. Piece by piece, year by year, I folded myself smaller and smaller until I fit inside the shape he had decided I was allowed to take up. This is what people outside of a marriage like that never understand. It is not one big, terrible moment that breaks you. It is 1,000 small ones, 1,000 quiet moments of being told with words, with silences, with looks across a room that you are less than you thought you were, until one day you look in the mirror and you genuinely cannot remember the girl you used to be. I looked in that mirror in the winter of 1882. I was 33 years old. Tired eyes, quiet hands, a woman who had learned to take up as little space as possible. And something happened in that moment. Something small, something quiet, like a single match being struck in a very dark room. I thought about my father. I thought he said I was the strongest person he knew. I thought, I have not been her in a very long time. I thought, but maybe she is still in there somewhere. I did not know yet what I was going to do, but something had started. And 3 months later, I went to the county records office and I found it. In the spring of 1882, I made a decision. I was going to find out what had actually been done legally, on paper with my father's land. Tom had been telling people for years that the property was his, that it came to him through our marriage. I always knew that was wrong. but knowing and proving are two very different things. So I told Tom I was going to Marfa to buy fabric. I went to the county records office instead. The clerk was a young man named Samuel, polite and thorough. I asked him to pull the original land deed my father had filed. He brought it out. And there it was, clear and plain. Sarah Ann Cooper, sole heir, legal owner. My father had left the land to me, and under Texas law, inherited property keeps its separate status even after marriage, as long as it was never formally transferred. Tom had never legally transferred it. He had simply acted as if it were his. For 11 years, he had acted as if it were his. That was the first thing I found. The second thing was an accident. Samuel had pulled a broader set of county documents to help me find my property's boundary lines. I was flipping through survey records, land transfers, and I stopped on one page. It was a boundary survey from 1879. It extended Roy Harlan's property, the largest ranch in the county, by nearly 400 acres. That land had belonged to two small ranchers who had gone broke and left the area. The survey had 3 signatures on it from county officials. The third signature was in a handwriting I knew better than my own. It was Tom's, signed under a false name. W.T. Cole, Deputy Surveyor. Tom had no position with the county. He had no business on a government survey document. He had forged his name under a false identity to help Roy Harlan steal 400 acres of land from 2 families who could not fight back, which meant Roy Harlan had paid him for it. I stood at that records counter for a very long time. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. My hands were completely still. I asked Samuel, very calmly, if I could have a copy of the survey document. He made me one. I folded it carefully. I thanked him. I walked outside into the Marfa sunshine, and I stood on that street for a moment, breathing slowly, thinking clearly. For what felt like the first time in years, this paper was power. Tom had given Roy Harlan a weapon and thought nobody was watching. He was wrong. I had been watching. I just had not known, until now, exactly what I was watching for. I walked back to my horse. I took off my left boot. I folded the survey copy in a piece of oilskin. I placed it in the bottom of that boot. I put the boot back on. I rode home to Dry Creek. I cooked Tom's supper. I washed the dishes. I did not say a single word, and I waited. For 14 months, I waited. Not from fear, not from weakness, from strategy. Because my father was a patient man, and he raised me to know that a well-timed truth is more powerful than a loud one. I did not know the moment was coming on August 14th, 1883. I did not know Tom was about to hand me the final piece I needed. August 14th, 1883. The hottest night of the year. The air was thick, dry, and still. Even the dogs had gone quiet. It was too hot to bother. I cooked supper, salt pork and cornbread. I set the table the way I always did. 2 plates, 2 cups, the cloth napkins my mother had embroidered with small blue flowers when she was young and still hopeful. Tom sat down. He ate without looking at me. Halfway through the meal, he pushed his plate aside. He leaned back. He looked at me with eyes I had once believed were kind. He said, "Roy Harlan is coming by tonight. $200 to clear my saloon debt. You be agreeable. I'll be back in the morning. I'll tree end of tree. Roy Harlan. Then he picked up his hat. He stood up. He walked out my front door. He did not look back at me. Not once. I sat at my kitchen table, my mother's table, my father's table. My table and I listened to his boots on the porch steps. Then the creak of the gate. Then nothing. Just the lantern flickering, the mule shifting in the pen, a coyote somewhere far away in the dark, and me. If you have ever sat in a moment where everything you thought your life was, everything you told yourself was fine, was manageable, was not as bad as it seemed. If you have ever sat in a moment where all of that collapses at once into one single, undeniable truth, you know what I felt right then. Not panic, clarity, a cold, wide open clarity, like a fog that had been sitting over everything for 12 years, suddenly lifted, and I could see, for the first time, exactly where I was standing, exactly how I had gotten there, and exactly what I had in my boot. Roy Harlan knocked at 8 o'clock. He was a large man, 50 years old, gray whiskers, small eyes, the permanent expression of a man who has never waited for anything in his life. I opened the door. I smiled. "Mr. Harlan, please come in. Can I pour you a glass of whiskey?" He walked into my home, my father's home, and sat down in Tom's chair like he owned it, because, as far as he was concerned, he had just bought it. I went to the kitchen. I poured him a tall glass of the good Kentucky whiskey, the honest kind not watered down. I poured myself a small glass that I held in both hands, but did not drink. I sat across from him. He talked. They always talk. About his ranch, his cattle, his land, his plans. He talked the way men like Roy always talk, like the world is simply spread out beneath them, waiting for their next decision. I listened. I nodded. I poured him another glass, and behind my eyes, behind my quiet hands, behind that agreeable smile, I was thinking about exactly one thing: the paper in my boot. By 11 o'clock, Roy's eyes were heavy. I counted to 100 after his breathing slowed. Then I stood up. I knew every creak in that floor. 12 years of moving quietly in that house had taught me exactly which boards to avoid. I moved along the walls. I reached into Roy's vest pocket, $200 in gold coins. I wrapped them in my handkerchief. Then I added $40 from the envelope I had hidden in the back of the flour tin, my own money. From a year of selling eggs and pies at McCready's, money Tom had never found. $240. Every cent I was owed. Then my fingers found something else in his pocket. Paper, folded thick. I carried it to the window where the moonlight came in strong. It was a letter from a lawyer in Austin. It said that a man named James Ames had filed a formal complaint about the 1879 boundary survey, that an investigation was beginning, that Roy should be prepared. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it exactly as it had been and put it back. I did not need to take it. I already had what I needed. I went to the bedroom. I took my father's land deed from the loose floorboard under the bed. I pulled on my boots, my left boot, with the survey copy still wrapped in oilskin inside. I lifted my mother's shawl from the bedpost. Brown wool, worn thin, the corner fraying where she had carried it against her shoulder for 30 years before she gave it to me. I wrapped it around my shoulders, and then I did something I had not done in 12 years. I walked out of that house for myself, not for an errand, not to fetch something, not to be somewhere I had been told to be. For myself, there is a difference between running away from something and walking toward something. That night, for the first time in 12 years, I was walking toward something. At the far edge of Dry Creek, past the last house, just before the open country began, there was a livery stable. Old wood, old hay, old smells. The night man there was named Earl. Earl was 60 years old. He walked slowly, spoke rarely, and had the kind of face that had been weathered by hard living until it held no expression at all, just a pair of steady eyes that had seen too much and decided a long time ago not to be surprised by any of it. I had spoken to Earl maybe 5 times in 12 years. I knocked on his stable door at midnight. He opened it. He looked at me at the shawl, the bundle, my boots still on. He looked at my face. He did not say a word. He just turned and walked back into the stable. I stood in the doorway, not certain whether to follow or leave. Then I heard the sound of a saddle being lifted, buckles being fastened, hooves shifting on straw. He let out a small brown mare, clean legs, wide nostrils, calm eyes. He held the reins out toward me. I looked at him. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him what he was risking. I started to speak. He shook his head, just slightly. Then he said slowly, like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was finally setting it down. My wife needed someone to hand her a horse once. Nobody did. Ride south. Keep the stars on your left. Don't stop till you reach the Presidio Road. And ma'am, don't look back. I took the reins. I did not cry. Not then. I pressed my lips together, and I nodded once. I put my foot in the stirrup. I rode, and I did not look back. I want to stop here for a moment, because right now, I am on that horse, riding south through the Texas dark. I have $240, a piece of paper, and my mother's shawl around my shoulders. That is all I have. And I have been thinking about how many people are watching this right now who understand in their body, not just their head, what that table felt like, what it feels like to sit across from someone who should have been safe and realize they never were. If this story is sitting heavy on you right now, I want you to know that is the right feeling. Drop something in the comments. Even just where you are watching from. People from everywhere find these stories, and I think there is something important about knowing you are not watching alone. If you are new here, please subscribe before we go further, because what happens next, what I find when I get to that courthouse, is something I did not expect, and I promise you, you will not expect it either. All right, I am still riding. The night is wide and black and full of stars. Let's keep going. I rode through the first night without stopping. Earl's mare was everything he had promised. Steady, calm, unafraid of the dark. We moved south, through the canyon country, with the stars sharp overhead and the red rock walls rising on either side. The only sounds were her breathing and the occasional cry of a nighthawk far off. I had never ridden alone at night before. I had never gone anywhere, truly alone, since I was 19 years old. It was frightening, and at the same time, it was the most awake I had felt in years. Like some part of me that had been held very still for a very long time, was finally allowed to move again. I let the mare rest at creek crossings. I drank from the creek myself, cold water on my face in the dark. I thought about my father. I thought about that tin box under his floorboards. I thought about the last thing he ever said to me. "You are the strongest person I know, Sarah. And I am including myself," I thought. "I hope you can see me right now, Dady." I arrived in Marfa on the evening of the third day. Sunburned, dusty, hungry, and absolutely certain. Marfa was larger than Dry Creek. Brick buildings, a stone courthouse with the state of Texas, seal carved above the door. I tied the mare at the post. I walked inside. I asked for the judge who heard civil property complaints. The clerk said, "Judge Arthur Lane, ma'am. Tuesdays and Thursdays." It was Wednesday. I said, "I will wait." I took a room at the hotel. 50 cents a night. I sat on the edge of the bed and laid everything out in front of me. My father's deed, the survey copy, the money. And then I took out paper and I began to write. Everything, every date, every conversation, every moment I had stored inside me for 12 years and 14 months. Every detail I had kept locked away where no one could reach it. I let it out onto those pages. I wrote for 3 hours without stopping. 7 pages. My hand ached. My eyes burned. I set the pen down. I looked at those pages, and I thought, this is the first time in 12 years that everything I know is outside of me instead of locked inside. It felt like breathing after a very long time, of not quite getting enough air. I slept. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. I walked into Judge Lane's chambers. He was a lean, silver-haired man who wore seriousness the way other men wear cologne. 16 years on the bench. He had seen everything. I sat down across from his desk without being asked, and I said clearly, "My name is Sarah Whitfield, born Sarah Cooper. I am the legal heir to a property in Dry Creek that has been claimed by my husband without my consent. I have evidence of land fraud involving Roy Harlan of Harlan Ridge Ranch, and I have evidence that on August 14th of this year, my husband sold me for $200 in gold to that same Roy Harlan." Judge Lane set down his pen. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I had not expected. "Mrs. Whitfield, you are the second person this week to bring me a document with Roy Harlan's name on it." I stared at him. He explained. 2 days prior, a letter had arrived from a woman in Dry Creek, a seamstress named Clara, who worked near the saloon. She had overheard Tom and Roy's arrangement 3 weeks ago. She had written down everything she remembered, signed her full name, had it witnessed, and posted it to the Presidio County Courthouse. A woman I had never had a full conversation with. A woman who did not know I was coming. A woman who had simply decided alone, in her own small room, at her own personal risk, that she could not stay silent. I had to press my lips together, because this is the thing history does not record. It records the verdicts. It does not record the people who made them possible. It does not record Clara the seamstress and her letter. It does not record Earl the stableman and his borrowed horse. Judge Lane read every document I laid on his desk. He read my 7 pages of testimony. Slowly, completely. He made pencil notes. He did not rush. When he finished, he looked up. He said, "Are you prepared to testify to all of this in open court?" I said, "I have been preparing for 14 months, Your Honor." He stood. He extended his hand across that wide oak desk. I shook it. He said, "Your father left you good land, Mrs. Whitfield. You are going to get it back." 6 weeks later, September 12th, 18 83. I was told later what happened when Sheriff Briggs walked into the Horseshoe Saloon in Dry Creek that morning. Tom was at his usual table. Card game, coffee, the easy confidence of a man who has been getting away with things long enough to believe he always will. The sheriff set a court summons on the table in front of him. Tom looked at it. Then he looked up. He said 4 words. Sarah did this. Not a question. A knowing. The kind you feel in your stomach before your mind has time to catch up. He had known since the morning he came home and found me gone, and Roy's coins missing. He had known the way guilty people always know quietly, in the dark, before they can bring themselves to say it out loud. He had underestimated me every day for 12 years. And in the end, that was the only mistake that mattered. Sheriff Briggs picked up his hat. He said, "She did, Mr. Whitfield. She surely did." Then he turned and walked out. Tom was convicted, falsifying a government document under a false name. Unlawful transaction involving a person, 14 months in the county jail. Roy Harlan was charged with land fraud and conspiracy. The 400 acres he had stolen through that forged survey were returned to the families who had owned them. Roy sold his ranch the following year to cover his legal costs and moved east. Nobody in Dry Creek spoke of him much after that. He simply became one of those names people stop saying, which is a particular kind of erasure that proud men find worse than any punishment. My father's land. My land was returned to my name. On October 5th, 1883, I went back to Dry Creek in November. The first cold snap had come through. The mesquites were bare. The sky was low and white. The air smelling of coming rain. I opened the house. It smelled of dust and of a life I was done with. I opened every window. I swept every room. I built a fire in my mother's hearth. Then I sat in the chair by the fire. I picked up a book, one of my father's, a battered collection of American essays I had read as a girl and not touched since my marriage. I opened it. I read. And for the first time in more years than I could count, nobody told me to stop. I think about that year a lot, not because of what I did, but because of how I did it. I did not do it loudly. Nobody came to rescue me. There was no single moment where everything became easy. I did it the way most real survival happens, quietly, patiently, with the small things I had available to me. A document I kept in my boot for 14 months. A stranger who mailed a letter she didn't have to send. An old man who handed me a horse without asking a single question. And a shawl that reminded me who I had always been. If you are watching this right now and something in this story is sitting in your chest, I want to say one thing to you directly. The person you were before someone started making you small, she is not gone. She is still in there. She has been waiting. She kept the paper. She kept the paper. My father told me I was the strongest person he knew. He was right. He was right about all of it. Thank you for watching. If this story found the right person today, please share it.